All right, guys, hey, and welcome back to the Gulf Coast Growth Show. I'm your host, Jason Lee, and I am joined today by Bruce Mann, the Director of Freight Mobility for the Port of Houston. Bruce, it's been a while.
It has been. It's good to be back.
Man, it's glad to have you. We loved it the last time you were on the show. I think we were saying before the show, it's probably been 4 or 5 years. It's weird how time flies. I was just in the car with Chad Burke. We had snuck out to lunch between shoots, and we were talking about something, and I said, God, it's been 5 years. You know,
and you guys upgraded because you got your own space here now.
Yeah, we had our own little. We were like in the corner and working out of the closet and stuff like that. So yeah, we're a big deal now. We're actually in the Shell studio. So Shell helped us do this, and we're pretty excited about it. For those that are new to the show, we talk about all things industrial, politics, not industrial, but transportation, logistics, supply chain. If it involves anything that comes through this region, either from sea, by air, by land, and then works its way out of here, then we're here to talk about it. And so we couldn't think of a better guy to talk about what's happening with freight. We know supply chain, everything that's just been a mess over the last couple of years, and I think we're all feeling the pain of it. So a guy like Bruce is right in the midst of all that, and so he's going to give some education today. So make sure you just stay closely, and then don't forget at the end of the show, make sure you share it with somebody. So with that being said, I know there's a lot of work going on well, explain to us real quick before we dive in, Bruce. What exactly do you do at the Port of Houston? When they say freight mobility? Tell me about that.
So, I'm the only person to ever have my job, so nobody really knows what I do.
Oh, there you go.
Which isn't a bad thing always. But no, so seriously, you think about this region, all the people that live here. We're the largest tonnage port in the U.S., right? And one of the largest container terminal ports in the U.S. and the longest, busiest ship channel in the U.S. And all of that stuff has to come off the channel and go somewhere.
Right.
So this is really, my job's really focused on making sure when it hits the land, it can move.
Okay.
Because you can invest $1 billion in the channel and billions of dollars in our container terminals, but if the truck hits the gate and then can't get anywhere, you haven't done anything.
Gotcha.
So it's really about making sure our region freight flows efficiently through the region. So that's it.
Fantastic. And so when people are thinking of freight and through the region, what I think a lot of times we forget that it comes in, but then it's got to work its way out all throughout the U.S. And really in the U.S. there's 3 major ports, right? There's maybe 4 or 5, but the 3 big ones are New York, L.A., and then Houston.
Right.
And from a historical perspective, I think those ports have been kind of divvied out, meaning certain things came through certain areas. And we, at one point in time, were just mostly oil and gas, fuels essentially, and chemicals, right? But I think we're trying to make a shift. We're trying to create more opportunities to do other things and get them pushed through our port and then through our area. And that has a lot to do with the job that you do, right?
Right. No, surely. And I think another thing too, a lot of people forget is, we're bringing a lot of stuff in, but we're the largest export port in the state, and Texas is the export state. So, with the widening of the Panama Canal, you look in 2016, at the end of 2016, we hit 2 million 20-foot equivalent units of containers moving through the port.
My gosh.
This year, we're probably going to end up around 3.7 million.
Oh, wow.
So 6 years ago, 2 million, the end of this year, 3.7. So that's like 85% growth, including COVID.
Wow.
So,
right.
I mean, there's been phenomenal growth. And you just, for every one of those containers, there's a truck.
Right.
That's a lot of trucks.
Right.
And that's just the containers. So there's still all the petrochemical industry and everything else. So it's phenomenal growth for our region. The state comptroller of Texas a few years ago, he's still the comptroller, said the port region is the economic engine of the state of Texas.
Yep.
And I think, so I've been working for the port for 7 years. It's funny because before I came to the port, I'm like, I didn't even know there was a port.
Right.
Because you're over here on the east side, and
right.
How many people come to the east side of Houston, right? And what I've learned over the years is, the Port of Houston, not the authority, but the port itself, is 20% of the Texas economy. And if Texas was a country, it'd be the 9th largest economy in the world.
Wow.
And this region that we're sitting in right here is 20% of the 9th largest economy in the world. That's mind-numbing when you think about it, right? Like, that's amazing. And that just tells you about Texas and really about our region.
Wow, well, that's amazing. When you think about it, and as we kind of entering an awkward season, not awkward, I would say a difficult season as people continue to talk about recession and things that are impacting our economy just because of the supply chain issues and things that have kind of come to a bubble or a head. I think what I've repeatedly heard is that there's a different level of insulation around our state. Not that we're not going to feel it, but we are going to still continue to see that there's still work to be done because of the global impact that we have.
Yeah, no, for sure. And I think Texas has done a really good job to diversify the economy.
Right.
I mean, you remember back in the 80s, when we had the oil issues, the 70s and the 80s, the recession that hit Texas back then is a lot different than recessions that hit Texas now. We've added back everything from COVID and added on top of it. And we have a very broad-based economy now. We've had so many Fortune 500 companies relocate to Texas. We're a different state than we were 20 years ago, especially from an economic perspective and diversity perspective. So we're a lot more able to handle kind of the ebbs and flows of the economy. And when you look at, the population growth itself, people buy stuff.
Right.
It's surprising, but we buy stuff.
Right.
And when you keep adding the number of people that we add, people buy stuff. So it's got to get here, right? Mm-hmm. And it's coming through the port. And as we continue to grow as a region, we're going to continue to bring stuff up. When you're talking about 85% growth in 6 years, and you've got a year and a half or 2 years of COVID in there, that means those years that weren't COVID years, you're 20% growth, 18% growth.
Right.
So, I don't know that we'll keep that up for my entire lifetime, but
right.
But we're humming.
Right.
We're humming.
That's fantastic.
It's not showing any signs of slowing down, which is really, I think, why my job exists. Because if you got that kind of growth, you need to make sure that we're investing in the roadways. So when it hits the gate, either in or out, like it can get on the ship and get out. So we're investing in our infrastructure. And when it's coming in, we need to get it out of the gate and through to wherever it's going. About 75 or 80% of what we move stays right here in the region. So we need to make sure that the goods can get around our region.
Wow. Okay.
That's the containers.
I didn't know that. 75 to 80% of what we move stays within our region.
For the containers, yeah. It's amazing.
Wow.
So,
well, you're funding the 9th largest economy in the world.
Right.
So it's not surprising to think that. So.
And Walmart is an example, right? So Walmart's this huge company, right? Well, 20% of their North American business comes through the Port of Houston.
Wow.
And you think about, that's a lot of stuff.
Yeah.
They're the largest grocery store in the country. So not only is it the stuff that people are buying, it's what they're eating.
Right.
So, and that's just one of the folks that are moving products in and out of the port. So,
amazing. So that's a great way to transition to the next topic because, obviously the growth is happening. So talk to me a little bit about some of the projects that are supporting the growth.
Yeah, so, when we sat down, it must have been 5 or 6 years ago now.
Yeah, I had a lot more hair.
I have a lot more gray hair.
Yeah.
But, we sat down and we talked about, hey, what's important? When I took this role, the first question I asked is, well, what's important? Where is the freight moving? Over what roads? Where do we need to invest? And I think at that time, we put together this group, Chad Burke from the Economic Alliance and Judge Emmett and some others were, a lot of the mayors, most of the mayors in the region here, ECMA, Harris County, a lot of folks were involved. We had a whole bunch of stakeholders that we all sat down in a room and said, hey, what's important? What roads, what connectors? And we came up with this list of 32 kind of freight projects that were important. 225. None of these are going to surprise anybody, right?
Right.
225, 146, direct connectors between the Beltway and 225, direct connector at Barbers Cut Boulevard and 146. Those are just some examples, right? But, I think one of the things that set apart what we did from anybody else that's tried to do it is we actually prioritized the list. Everybody's good at putting together a list. Nobody's good at fighting over what's important, what's more important, and what's not as important.
Right.
Because they're all important. The 32 projects are pulled out of hundreds of projects. These are the 32 that we kind of brought to the top and said, here's the priorities. So what we're doing today is refreshing the list. Because just the process of going through that list, we sat down and had a conversation with Quincy Allen, who was the district engineer for TxDOT back then. And he was like, well, I didn't know 225 was that important. And just out of that conversation alone, TxDOT committed to a planning, environmental, and linkage study, which is really kind of a corridor study on 225 that says, well, what does the next version of 225 need to look like? So we're 18 months into that study, have a little bit longer to go, but it's going to start to plan out what should 225 look like. And not only that, but most of the projects on this list of 32 projects now have progress.
Right.
They've been funded, they're in construction, there's commitments for funding for them. So just that process and prioritizing it really, I was on a webcast with DOT, FHWA, one of them, somebody from DC.
Right.
And, they talked about what we did because nobody really goes that step of prioritizing. And what I always kind of get a laugh out of is I'll see other people make presentations and they have our project list as part of their presentation.
Right.
And that's like, you did something when?
When? Yeah.
Like
when other people are talking about your work.
No, exactly. So Chad really helped out. We did the Economic Alliance, and all of the stakeholders really have set the stage for investment. And really now we've got to do the second round of it, which is reimagine, re-envision what that list needs to look like. And I think this time it's going to be different. We were just focused on trying to add capacity.
Right.
And I think we're still focused on adding capacity, but I think, we want to do it responsibly. The environment is an important thing for the port. We want to look at projects and opportunities that will help the environment. Hydrogen power, as an example, alternative fuels for trucks, electric trucks. Freight shuttle, kind of an elevated guideway that's electric linear induction motors, where you take the truck completely off the road in a lot of cases. So how can we add capacity to the roadway by taking freight off the road? So there's projects like that, and then just being more responsible for the environment. We have issues with attainment in our region, the Houston region, for emissions. How can we be more responsible stewards in our region? So we're taking it next level as we go to this second round of creating the freight priority project list.
Wow. So when you talk about this freight, I got two questions specific about that list. First one is, who is this? Whenever this list is being compiled, I mean, is it organizations like the Economic Alliance? So what are all the bodies of representation that get to say, hey, this is the critical nature of these lists? Is it federal, local, state? I mean, who all is at that table?
When we did this, I always tell people it's kind of like herding cats. But
okay,
there's a lot of folks with a lot of different opinions. But it's Commissioner Combs from Chambers County. So Chambers County is involved in this next iteration, because when we did this 6 years ago, there was some activity happening in Chambers County, but the growth that's happened there in the last 6 years, so they're coming and sitting at the table this time to have the conversation.
Wow. Okay.
The Economic Alliance, East Harris County Manufacturing Association, all of the region's mayors, all the small city mayors, Precinct 2 specifically, Harris County, because most of the port region lies in Precinct 2. But the last time we did this, Judge Emmett was part of it. Anybody, Baytran, TAG, anybody that has an interest in transportation and understands what it is that we're doing, they all want to advocate for their projects, right?
Right.
And so, and that's the easy part. Getting everybody together to talk about it's the easy part, because I think people that that understand we need to continue to invest in the freight network, they're passionate about it. I think in a lot of cases, there's been over $50 billion, big B, billion, $50 billion worth of investment in the petrochemical industry in this region. There's been a couple million in the freight network. Right. Maybe 10, 20, 30 million. So we have capacity, which is good. Right. But we need to build more capacity. It takes 7 to 10 years to build a road. They can build a full-scale polypropylene, polyethylene plant in 18 months. Oh, yeah. So there's a natural disconnect there. Right.
Yeah, that was one of my second questions, was from the time that you guys, from the time something makes it to that list to the time that we see it happening, what is that usual time? Is it 10 years?
It's interesting because I think some projects are easier to push ahead than others. I think the beauty of the list itself was getting people to recognize what's important. So the 330 connector between 146 and I-10 is a perfect example. So we had it on the list. We're sitting down with TxDOT. We're talking about, TxDOT's one of our big stakeholders. Let me put them in there too. Yeah. Because we couldn't do it without the county and without TxDOT. But we put it on our list, and there was already an existing plan for TxDOT to make that connection, because all these trucks were coming off at 330 to 146 to 330 and then stopping at a stoplight to get onto I-10. Very inefficient, bad for emissions. Quincy said, hey, I didn't realize it was this important. Right before he left to go to Austin, he took the district engineer from TxDOT has some discretionary money they get to put against certain projects. His gift to us before he left was, hey, let's get this thing done. So he moved that project up as an example. So it might have been a year 7 project, but it went to year 2.
Oh, nice. Okay.
So a lot of this is projects that TxDOT really knew about, but it shuffled them up ahead in the priority. And then there's projects like 225 where, 225 has been built over time since the 70s. If you go take a drive out there, it's kind of a rough drive.
Oh, yeah.
And if you're out there when the trucks are moving, it can be a little, you wouldn't want to take your driver's ed training on 225, no. Right? So, we've got a lot of growth that's happening in the region, a lot of trucks. And I think what's different about 225 and 146, really more than any other roads in our region, is you've got a lot of freight and you've got a lot of people, and they're both trying to move at the same time. You look at I-10 and the freight, there's a lot of freight movement, but there's a whole heck of a lot more commuters. When you come over on this side of town, there's a lot more balance, which means you have to drive a little bit differently, right? But, TxDOT says, hey, we need to study this. So you've got a 2 or 3 year study, and then that study recommends projects.
Oh, wow.
So then, okay, now we've got what project should we do? So you got to prioritize the outcomes of it. Then you've got to go design them. Then you've got to figure out how to fund it. Then you've got to construct it. And in the middle of all of that is the environmental work as well, right? So,
oh, wow.
So when you talk about a 2 or 3 year plan for a PEL, then 7 to 10 years maybe on top of that, it's a long window to get, we don't even know what we're going to do with 225, but we know it's going to be important. Right. So we've already started talking about, hey, there's a planning environmental linkage study that's going on in 225. There's one over on I-10, kind of east of 610. And then you've got 45 between 610 and the Beltway. Those are all PELs that are going on right now. Those are going to generate $10-20 billion worth of projects. None of those are in the plan, and none of them have funding.
Oh, wow.
That's my job.
Right.
Figure out how we're going to get people to understand these projects are going to be important, and we're already starting to have, hey, when they get spun off and projects are created, we need funding.
Right.
Because you look at all of the money that's coming in now with IIJA and the money that the federal legislatures kind of said, hey, we need to fund infrastructure. We need to make sure that some of this money is going to end up on 225.
Right.
Because I think the ship channel is the most important infrastructure project in the entire country. Coastal protection probably isn't far behind that.
Right.
225 isn't far behind either one of those. I mean, this is the breadbasket of petrochemical,
right.
the petrochemical complex in our country, and the growth of exports. I mean, without Texas, the national economy kind of grounds to a halt, right? All of the refining that happens in our region. When Harvey happened, one of the first phone calls that was made was from Judge Emmett to the CEO, the executive director of Port. How fast can you get the port back up?
Yep.
Because I don't know how many people remember, but they were talking about, hey, we might have to cancel flights, and I think some flights actually got canceled because aviation fuel was starting to run short.
Yeah. Yep.
Because it gets refined over here. So you shut down the port, you shut down the country.
Right.
So, and that's why coastal protection is important. That's why the ship channel getting wider is important, and that's why my job's important. Really, let's build the landside infrastructure to make sure all this can move.
Wow.
So it's all connected.
So back to your job. You got an important job. You're kind of a big deal. It's okay.
Hey, we all have a part, right? Like,
right.
No channel, no port. No port, no job. So
yeah. Well, so I actually have to deal with that exit right there at 610 with this next 3-year Galleria construction projects, and that might not be in your department because you're in the port. But if you know a guy, I got to grease some palms to get that moved up. A couple of years, it'd be great because it's added 2 hours to my life every day. I'm just kidding.
The 610 project I'm worried about is replacing this bridge.
Yeah.
That bridge is, I think, 49 years old now.
Oh, my God.
And it had a 50-year design life. Don't worry, it's still safe.
Yeah, I was about to say, yeah.
But
you just got right now on one of those episodes, someone's going to be listening to it on their drive in on the bridge and think, "Oh my God!"
Right. But we're talking about the replacement of that bridge.
Mm-hmm.
And you got people around that remember. I was talking to Roger Gunther, the executive director of the port, the other day, and he was telling me about how he was when he was a kid, there was no bridge. And now we're talking about replacing the bridge. So
that's crazy.
And that might be, a $3 billion project. Because,
wow.
You think about that bridge and it's going to have to go taller. I-10 is right there. And 45 is right there. And 225 goes into 610. So you've got these two major interstates in a state highway that all connect to 610. And when you take that bridge higher and you take the bridge wider, it's expensive.
Oh yeah,
so
that's crazy.
And it's not funded yet.
Yeah.
So it's in the plan, in the regional transportation plan, but it's we got to figure out how we're going to pay for that.
Right. So because we're getting close to the end of our time, I want to make sure we get a chance to touch up on one of your big passions and a really critical talking point. I want to discuss human trafficking. Is there anything that we need to make sure we tackle project-wise or capture before we jump to that next topic?
No, I think,
I think we hit it?
Freight's important.
Good.
We need to continue investing in it. Anybody that will listen to you, if you know any congressmen or senators or representatives, tell them to give us money.
Fantastic. So, and again, let it be another great plug for why organizations like this exist, because you might not have the capacity to get out and go meet a Bruce or figure out who's responsible for that decision making, but the organizations like this, or your local chambers, or your local city governors, or city government, those are the people that, I mean, most local cities have an economic development organization that serves them for things just like this. So if you want to have an impact in your backyard, get plugged in and be a part of it. If not, don't complain.
Right.
Right?
Yeah.
When you're sitting in traffic. So if you can figure out a way, because there are guys like Bruce aren't just doing, showing up, putting their head down in a desk somewhere. They're actually out plugging into organizations, hearing what people have to say, finding out the needs of the people that serve in this region.
Yep.
And how they can impact you. So make sure you stay connected. That being said, let's go ahead and shift gears, because this one's kind of a passion project, but also something that I think is very, very relevant to the port and the work that you guys are doing. Let's talk a little bit about human trafficking. We've talked enough about the other traffic. Let's talk about another big one that's a problem for out here in Houston, really throughout the nation.
Yeah. No, I think in both of these instances, if you're not part of the solution, you're part of the problem.
Yep.
And I think part of the solution sometimes is just being aware. And I think a lot of people, unfortunately, don't know about human trafficking and how big of an issue it is, and really how pervasive it is, not just here, but everywhere.
Right.
They consider human trafficking part of modern day slavery, and there's more people in slavery today than there's ever been in any point in our history. That's how big of an issue this is.
Oh my gosh.
If you took, just worldwide, if human trafficking was a company, it's bigger than Ford Motor Company globally. I mean, that's how big it is. So, and it's in your neighborhood. Like, you don't think that it is, but it is. If you're, driving down your street, and we've all seen this. Like, you see the massage parlors that, like, they have the open windows and you can see in.
Right.
They got the front desk and you can see it from the parking lot. But we've all seen those ones where you park in the little strip mall and it's got the mirrored glass and
Right.
you can't see in, and the door that locks, and, a reflexology
Right.
place or whatever.
Right.
Like, yeah.
Inconspicuous in the corner.
Right.
Right.
That's nothing. I think somebody once said, nothing good happens in the dark.
Right.
Well, nothing good happens in those places in
Right.
large part. And what most people don't realize is, you're driving down the street, there's a Starbucks on every corner, right?
Right.
Yeah, well, there's more of these places than there are Starbucks. It's that pervasive. So it's just about being educated and not contributing to it. Not, we as a culture, we need to change.
Okay.
I think, when I was a kid, that wasn't that long ago.
28, 27.
Yeah, it was just a few years ago, like last year.
Yeah.
Going to a strip club was a rite of passage.
Mm-hmm.
That's the culture that we had.
Right.
And today, trafficking is happening in those places. And is that really what you want to support? One, it's kind of passé. I mean, who really wants to go to those places
Right.
anymore? But two, if you're going, understand what you're actually contributing to.
Right.
I mean, these are people being trafficked. And, I was in the military for a few years, and I don't want to minimize this at all. PTSD from the military is a thing.
Right.
What people experience in combat and what they have to deal with is significant, and it's real. It's traumatic. A lot of times, that's something that occurs over a short time. People that are being trafficked experience that every day for years. And the journey out of trafficking, just from the victim standpoint, you don't just flip a switch and somebody's okay.
No.
What we do to people is horrific. And, it takes years and years and years We talk about suicide rates of veterans, and it's horrific. A veteran dies every day, right, from suicide. People that are being trafficked die every day, and the violence that's put onto these people, it's insane what we do to people, and we need to make sure that we're not contributing to it. We need to make sure that we're engaged in our communities, and reporting this stuff when we see it. Call the sheriff's office, call the police department. Hey, there's people coming out of this place all hours of the day and night, right? I think to Houston's credit, we're far ahead of the rest of the world in really trying to fight this as a city. The mayor, Mayor Turner, the mayor before him, and I'm going to forget her name now, but we're a model across the world on how to engage and fight this. People say that Houston is the center of trafficking in the United States. I disagree with that statement. I think we're the center of fighting it in the United States. We have more reports of it because we're more engaged in fighting it than anyone else. So I'm proud to be from Houston and the work that we're doing. It's conversations in the legislature, it's conversations in City Hall. The governor's wife is involved in it. The governor's involved in trying to fight it. All of us realize how big of an issue it is. And, part of this is realizing who's at risk. And it's our kids. One of the biggest ways to make sure that your children aren't trafficked is to be present, is to be a good parent, to watch what's going on with them, to be engaged in them. One of the biggest ways into human trafficking is people that run away from home. Within 48 hours, 72 hours, they're picked up by somebody. And, if you're not getting love at home, somebody's going to Romeo you and tell you they're going to give you the world, and they buy you all these gifts. And then the next thing you know, you're being trafficked, and your choices between sometimes being abused at home or being abused over here, but at least this guy's giving me gifts. You're picking the lesser of two evils. And I think, being present as parents and being engaged in our churches, in the youth groups, when you see someone kind of transition from this happy kid to all of a sudden they're pulled back and kind of separating themselves, go engage with that person. Find out what's going on and have a conversation. We need to care about people. One of the other things that I'm involved in a lot at the port and really have been in the last 6-7 years is DE&I work. DE&I work and human trafficking are related, and they're related, and we just need to care about people.
Right.
We need to do the right thing. DE&I isn't complicated. It's doing the right thing. Right. Ending human trafficking isn't complicated. It's doing the right thing. We should just care about people. It's a moral question. A lot of these things are moral questions. DE&I and human trafficking are moral questions. And we need to be better as a country in how we treat people. And we shouldn't have the most slavery that we've ever had today. Slavery should be gone. It should be a relic. It should be something you talk about from a textbook, not in a current conversation.
So, if someone's listening to this and they feel compelled or moved, how do they take action?
So there's an organization called Red M. If you go on LinkedIn, if you go on Facebook, if you go on Instagram, I think they're on all of those platforms. But what Red M is really, it's professionals that want to get engaged and fight in this, and you do pro bono work. If you're a marketing person, hey, we need help doing marketing for events. If you're, an operations person and you know how to do events, hey, we need your help to figure out how to run these events, golf tournaments, whatever. No matter what you do, we can find a way for your skill set to be leveraged to help
Right.
fight against human trafficking. There was just an event out at the airport that Red M was part of. It's really a great way for all of us to give back. And, I think most of us, probably all of us that are watching this podcast or part of it, have all been given a lot. And there's a responsibility from those of us that are given a lot to give back. And I think this is one of those ways that we can give back and really help elevate people.
Fantastic. And if anybody wants to reach out to you, what's the best way?
You can just reach me at work, bmann at porthouston.com, B as in Bruce, MANN at porthouston.com. Whether about any of the topics that we talked about today. DE&I is a passion of mine too. We could talk all day about that. That's probably a whole
Well, we
other
probably
show.
have to have another show. Yeah, I was going to say, we'll put another show together because that is important stuff and we do need to talk about it. That being said, it's funny because I know you, and have gotten developed a relationship with you. And so while there's a part here to hit your highlights, I know that your highlights fell in comparison to the amount of time that you spent talking about what matters to you more than you. And your awards is the passion of getting after human trafficking. So while we're running short on time, I do want to make sure that we acknowledge the fact that you were the Global Port Executive of the Year, and that you have done some, that you continue to shine in your deal, but it fails in comparison to the work that you're doing to impact human trafficking and your passion there, and we could feel that. So it went from really passionate about freight traffic to extremely passionate and heartfelt about human trafficking. So thank you for that.
Yeah. No, I think if you never worry about the credit will come. Mm-hmm. Like I don't care who gets the credit. Like, why should we?
Right.
This is about elevating people, helping people, whether it's freight movement or human trafficking or DE&I. We all owe a responsibility to give back, and I don't earn those awards. They look great on a shelf, whatever. They don't sit in my office because I just want to be able to look in the mirror and like myself.
Yeah.
Like, and feel like, hey, I accomplished something, and I'm leaving the world a better place than when I came into it.
Absolutely. Well, I can say that I hope you don't leave anytime soon, but in the time that you have been here, you absolutely are. Thank you. I appreciate that. That's a blessing. So, guys, as we get ready to wrap up, again, I want to thank you, Bruce, for coming on. I want to thank you for educating people about all this great stuff today. I want to remind our audience that we're always going to encourage you to take a call of action, to step out and do more. You can get plugged in to your local organizations, and if you feel called, again, it's Red M is the organization. If you feel called to take action towards human trafficking, or just get plugged in, and don't take it for granted. It is happening in our backyard. It is something that's happening day in and day out, and things like you mentioned. I never thought about that, but I grew up in these kid movies, or not kid movies, but they showed a bunch of boys acting off and goofing off, and they were going into a strip club, like you said, and you're like, oh, well, that's cool. I guess I'll do that when I'm 18. And these days, you go run into one of those places, and half that place could be full of people who are there against their will, and it's just heartbreaking. So, again, please take action. And then if you ever want to stay connected, if this is your first time hearing the show, you want to get plugged in, you can go to allianceportregion.com. Once you go in there, you can go under media, and you can subscribe to any of our channels. You can follow us we have YouTube, Facebook, Spotify, iTunes, anywhere that you can find your content. You can find the Gulf Coast Growth Show. Stay plugged in. If you want to reach out to me with any guest suggestions, ideas, thoughts, stuff you'd love to see, easiest place to find me is on LinkedIn. I'd love to hear from you. I'd love to get connected. Thanks a lot, guys, for tuning in today, and we'll see you next week.